In a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town, lived a young single mom named Isabel. Her life was a never-ending cycle of exhaustion. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., her alarm rang, not because she had the luxury of choice, but because survival demanded it. She would drag herself out of bed, tiptoe so she wouldn't wake her little girl, and put on the uniform of her first job, a faded diner outfit with a name tag that had started to rust at the edges. At the diner, Isabel served endless cups of coffee to truck drivers and office workers rushing to start their day. She smiled politely even when customers snapped at her for being too slow or for mixing up an order. Her feet ached, her back throbbed, but she kept going, because she knew she didn't have the option to quit. As soon as her shift ended, Isabel would run to the back restroom, quickly change clothes, and head straight to her second job, stocking shelves at the local grocery store. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, some nights she had to mop sticky soda spills in the aisles or lift heavy boxes until her arms shook. But the hardest part wasn't the physical pain. It was knowing that despite working 2 jobs, she was still barely holding it together. Bills piled up on her kitchen counter. Past due notices arrived in red letters that made her stomach twist. She often had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying enough groceries to last the week. And society wasn't kind. Some neighbors whispered about her. Others gave her pitying looks that stung even more than insults. Isabel often felt invisible, like the world had written her off as just another struggling single mom who would never amount to anything. But every night, when she came home, tired and broken, her daughter's smile gave her strength. Her little girl would run into her arms, wrapping her tiny hands around her neck as if to remind her that love was still alive in their home. One night, as Isabel sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, tears streaming down her face, her daughter climbed onto her lap. She wiped her mother's tears and whispered with the innocent certainty only a child could have, "Mommy, you can do anything. I believe in you." Those words hit Isabel's heart like a spark in the dark. For the first time in a long time, she felt something shift inside her. She didn't know how, but she knew she couldn't keep living like this. She had to find a way, not just for herself, but for the little girl who thought she was a hero. But Isabel had buried a part of herself long ago, a dream she once had, before life got hard. Long before Isabel was a mother, she had a dream. Back in high school, she was known for her creativity. She could take old thrift store clothes and turn them into something stylish. Teachers encouraged her. Friends asked her to design outfits for school dances. Deep down, Isabel dreamed of starting her own fashion line someday. But then life got messy. She became a mom young, and the weight of responsibility crushed every dream she once had. Survival came first. So she packed away her sketchbooks, folded her sewing machine into a corner, and told herself, dreams don't pay the bills. For years, that creative fire inside her remained buried. Until one night, when her daughter came home from school in tears. Some kids had laughed at her old, faded clothes. Isabel's heart broke. She couldn't afford new ones, but she couldn't let her daughter feel ashamed either. So, after putting her daughter to bed, Isabel pulled out her dusty sewing machine. She rummaged through old fabric scraps she had kept over the years and stayed up the whole night creating a dress. It wasn't perfect, but it was unique, colorful, and full of love. The next morning, her daughter wore it to school. When she came home that afternoon, she was glowing. "Mommy, everyone loved my dress. They said it looked like something from a store." That moment was electric. Isabel felt something she hadn't felt in years, a spark. Soon, neighbors began noticing. A friend asked if she could make an outfit for her daughter's birthday. Another mom from the school requested a custom piece for a recital. Slowly, people weren't just being kind, they genuinely admired Isabel's talent. One evening, after tucking her daughter in, Isabel went into the closet and pulled out the old box of sketches she hadn't looked at in nearly a decade. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. The designs were raw but full of potential. She stared at them and whispered to herself, maybe this wasn't meant to stay a dream. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where she wasn't just surviving, but creating, thriving, and maybe even building something bigger. But imagining is one thing. taking the first step into the unknown is another. Starting wasn't easy. Isabel didn't have savings, investors, or connections. All she had was determination and a sewing machine that sounded like it was on its last breath. She decided to make a small collection of handmade outfits and sell them at the local farmer's market. She worked late into the night, often falling asleep at the machine, only to wake up and keep going. Her fingers were blistered, her eyes heavy, but her heart was determined. On the morning of the market, she set up a tiny table with neatly folded clothes. She wrote, "Handmade by Isabel," on a piece of cardboard with a black marker and prayed someone would notice. At first, people walked by without stopping. Isabel's heart sank. Every second felt heavier, every doubt louder. What am I doing here? Who's going to buy from me? But then a woman paused. She picked up a small dress, felt the fabric, and looked Isabel in the eye. "Did you make this yourself?" she asked. Isabel nodded nervously. The woman smiled. "I'll take it." She handed over the cash, and just like that, Isabel made her first sale. Her heart nearly burst with joy. Soon, more people stopped by. One purchase turned into another. By noon, Isabel's table was empty, sold out. Customers asked when she would be back and if she had more designs. That night, Isabel sat on her couch, exhausted but glowing. For the first time, she felt hope wasn't just a dream. It was real, it was possible. But hope doesn't erase reality. Rent was still due. Bills still piled up. And for every small win, Isabel was about to face setbacks that would test her like never before. For a moment, Isabel thought she had finally found her way out of the endless grind. That farmer's market had given her a taste of success, but reality was quick to remind her that dreams were never that easy. The next few months became some of the hardest of her life. She tried expanding her little clothing line by buying more fabric, but the money she made barely covered the cost of materials. Some nights, she had to choose. Should she buy fabric to make more clothes, or food to fill the fridge? More often than not, she chose food for her daughter, going to bed hungry herself. Her apartment became her workshop. Thread spools rolled across the floor, fabric piled up on the couch, and the kitchen table became her cutting station. Sometimes she'd sew late into the night, and her daughter would fall asleep on the couch beside her, curled up in a blanket. But the toughest battles weren't just financial, they were emotional. When Isabel tried applying for a small business loan at the bank, the loan officer didn't even hide his skepticism. He looked at her paperwork, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You don't have collateral. You don't have credit. And you think people will buy clothes you sew out of your apartment." He slid her paperwork back across the desk with a cold smile. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark, but this isn't realistic." Isabel walked out of that bank with tears burning in her eyes. She felt humiliated, as if the world was telling her she wasn't good enough. Even investors she approached through local networking events laughed at her ideas. One woman actually said, "Honey, everyone sells online these days. You're too small to compete." But what hurt the most were the moments when her daughter saw her struggle. One evening, Isabel broke down crying at the sewing machine, the bills spread out beside her. Her daughter gently touched her arm and whispered, "Mommy, don't cry. You always tell me we don't quit." Those words pierced Isabel's heart. She realized she couldn't give up, not when her daughter believed in her so strongly. So she pushed harder. She worked extra shifts at the grocery store just to afford fabric. She sewed until her hands cramped. She carried boxes of clothes on the bus to deliver to customers because she couldn't afford shipping. Every sale felt like a victory, but every rejection cut deep. It was a constant tug-of-war between hope and despair. Still, she refused to quit. But just when Isabel thought she couldn't keep going any longer, fate sent someone unexpected her way, someone who would change everything. It was on a rainy afternoon at the farmer's market when Isabel's life shifted again. Business had been slow that day. People rushed past her booth with umbrellas, barely stopping to glance at her handmade clothes. Isabel sat quietly, defeated, wondering if all her hard work was really worth it. That's when a woman in her early 50s stopped at her table. She had sharp eyes but a warm smile, and she carefully inspected the stitching on a little girl's dress Isabel had made. "You made this yourself?" the woman asked. "Yes, Isabel replied, bracing herself for criticism. Instead, the woman nodded with approval. "This is good work. Very good." She looked up and introduced herself, Margaret. What Isabel didn't know was that Margaret had once owned a small boutique downtown. Though retired now, she knew quality craftsmanship when she saw it. And more importantly, she recognized determination in Isabel's eyes, the same determination she once had when she was starting out. Margaret asked about Isabel's story. At first, Isabel was embarrassed, but as the conversation flowed, she opened up about being a single mom, about working 2 jobs, about trying to keep the lights on while building a dream. Margaret listened quietly, then said something Isabel would never forget. "You don't have to do this alone. Let me help you." From that day on, Margaret became her mentor. She taught Isabel how to price her products properly, how to manage money so she wouldn't always be broke after every sale, and how to reach more customers online instead of relying only on the farmer's market. Margaret even introduced her to contacts in the local fashion community. Photographers who could showcase her clothes, small shops willing to carry her designs, and a seamstress who sometimes helped her with large orders. At first, Isabel resisted. She wasn't used to accepting help. She was used to carrying the whole world on her back. But little by little, she realized Margaret wasn't trying to take over, she was trying to lift her up. With guidance, Isabel's small business began to grow. She launched an online store, posted her designs on social media, and slowly built a loyal customer base. But growth came with pressure. The demand for her clothes increased, and Isabel realized she had to take risks she had never imagined before. By now, Isabel's designs were gaining traction. Orders trickled in steadily online, and her daughter proudly told her classmates, "My mommy makes clothes that people buy from all over." But real breakthrough moments are rare. And when one came for Isabel, it arrived like a storm. One evening, while scrolling through her social media page, Isabel noticed that one of her designs, a bright, floral dress she had posted casually, had gone viral. People were sharing it, commenting, tagging friends. Overnight, her inbox filled with messages. "Do you ship nationwide? Can you make this in my size? Where can I order?" Isabel's heart raced. She had never seen this kind of attention before. But excitement quickly turned into panic. She didn't have enough inventory, fabric, or hands to meet this sudden demand. For 2 days straight, she barely slept, sewing as fast as she could. Margaret stopped by and said, "Isabel, this is your chance. But you need to think bigger. Hire help. Take a leap." The thought terrified Isabel. Hire people? She could barely afford rent most months. But Margaret was right. If she didn't seize this moment, it would slip away. So, with trembling courage, Isabel took the little savings she had scraped together and invested in bulk fabric. She hired 2 part-time seamstresses who worked out of her apartment with her. Together, they fulfilled every single order that had come in from that viral post. The response was overwhelming. Customers sent photos of themselves wearing her designs. Influencers tagged her online. And within weeks, her small online store transformed into something she could no longer call a side hustle. But with every step forward came new risks. Isabel knew she had to scale up, find a real workspace, and build a team. It was no longer about surviving, it was about building an empire. Soon, we'll see how Isabel takes the leap from a small side business to becoming the CEO of a company that would change her life and her daughter's forever. The next few years were nothing short of a battlefield for Isabel. She had built momentum after that viral moment, but momentum alone wasn't enough. She needed to build infrastructure, and that meant stepping into a world she had never known before. For the first time, Isabel rented a tiny office space above a bakery downtown. It was nothing glamorous. The air conditioning barely worked in the summer, and the heating rattled in the winter, but to her, it was a palace. She set up folding tables, brought in sewing machines, and slowly built a team of 3 women who, like her, needed second chances in life. One was a single mother who had lost her job during the pandemic. Another was an older woman with years of sewing experience but no one willing to hire her. Isabel didn't just employ them, she gave them dignity. Balancing everything was brutal. Isabel still worked night shifts at the grocery store for a while, just to keep a steady income while reinvesting everything into the business. She barely slept. Some days, she'd rush from the grocery store at dawn to the workshop, spend the entire day sewing, packing, and handling orders, and then come home to help her daughter with homework before collapsing into bed. But her daughter, now almost a teenager, never complained. In fact, she became her mother's biggest cheerleader. She'd hand out business cards at school events, help pack boxes, and even model some of the clothes online. When classmates asked where she got her outfits, she proudly answered, "My mom made it. My mom has her own company." Slowly but surely, Isabel's brand grew. Her designs started appearing in local boutiques. She was invited to community fashion shows. Even magazines began writing about her story, the single mom who turned scraps of fabric into a business. The most surreal moment came when Isabel signed her first major contract with a retail chain that wanted to carry her designs in multiple stores. She remembered sitting in that meeting, across from polished executives in suits, her hands trembling as she signed her name on the dotted line. Walking out of that building, she looked up at the city skyline and whispered to herself, "We did it." Years later, Isabel walked into a gleaming high-rise office, but this time, not as a temp worker, not as someone stocking shelves or serving coffee, but as the CEO of her own company. The walls of her office were covered in framed designs, her brand logo lit up in gold, and her team had grown into dozens of employees. But what moved her the most was seeing her daughter, now in high school, walking proudly through that office, introducing her friends, "This is my mom. She built this with her own hands." From struggling single mom to so. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with nights of doubt. But Isabel had made it. But success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about what you do once you're there. With success finally secure, Isabel made a promise to herself. She would never forget where she came from. She remembered every eviction notice, every rejection at the bank, every night of going to bed hungry so her daughter could eat. And she knew there were countless women just like her, struggling, fighting, trying to hold their families together while the world told them they couldn't succeed. So she created a scholarship fund for single mothers, giving them money to pursue education or start businesses of their own. She started mentorship programs, teaching women how to balance survival with building something bigger. Her company even opened a childcare center right inside the headquarters, so moms working there wouldn't have to choose between their children and their careers. One evening, Isabel stood on stage at a women's empowerment conference. The room was packed, cameras flashing, reporters scribbling notes. She looked out at the sea of faces, women of all ages, some smiling, some with tears in their eyes, and began to share her story. Her voice cracked as she said, "I was once a struggling single mom with nothing but hope. There were nights I thought I wouldn't make it. There were days I wanted to give up. But I kept going, not because I was strong, but because my daughter believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. If I could build an empire starting with nothing but an old sewing machine, then so can you." The crowd erupted in applause. Some women stood. Some cried. Others whispered, "That's me. That's my story too." After the speech, Isabel walked backstage. Her daughter was waiting, tears in her eyes. She hugged her mother tightly and whispered, "Mom, I always knew you could do it. And now everyone else knows too." In that moment, Isabel realized the truth. The empire she built wasn't just about fashion, money, or success. It was about proving that love, resilience, and perseverance could change destiny. Moral of this story: no matter how heavy life feels, no matter how many people doubt you, your circumstances do not define your future. Isabel's story proves that love, resilience, and determination can turn the deepest struggles into the greatest victories. When you refuse to give up, even when the world tells you to, you don't just change your own life, you inspire others to believe they can change theirs too. If you refuse to give up, you can turn struggle into strength, and strength into success. If Isabel's journey inspired you, remember this: you already have everything you need to start building your own empire: faith, determination, and the courage to keep going. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start today, no matter how small, because you never know how far your story can go. Like and subscribe for more in spring stories and let us know in the comment where you are watching from. And remember, we are not just telling stories. We are changing lives.